Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Claridge. I'm the chairman of the Trust Alliance. I'm standing in for Terry Copeland, who is unfortunately unable to join us today. So I'll be speaking to you on behalf of Federated Farmers, talking you through the Digital Farm Wallet pilot project, which Federated Farmers are part of, that the Trust Alliance is launching here in New Zealand. I've got some slides that I'm going to show, and therefore I will be sharing my screen. If anyone's got any questions, please put them into the chat. I can't quite see the chat yet. Just seeing it coming up. Yeah, I've got the webinar chat. There you go. So please put your type your messages into the webinar chat, and I'll deal with that at the end in a Q&A session. So I'll speak for about 40 minutes or thereabouts. But if a question comes up during my presentation, I'll happily speak to that question if it helps throw more light on the area that I'm talking to. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen now. So bear with me. I'll just start my slideshow. And share the screen. There we go. Right, hopefully you should be able to see my screen here. Great. So as I said earlier, my name is Chris Claridge. I'm the chairman of the Trust Alliance. We're a incorporated organization, incorporated society, formed some 2 years ago, and we have 30 members, of which one is Federated Farmers. And we are trying to solve some key problems in the rural sector around data, and particularly farm data. And there's a couple of key problems that we're having to solve. And the first key problem we're having to solve is that we don't in New Zealand have a farm registry. If you like, we don't have a unique identifier for farm organizations. And that's quite unusual in a world sense. And it's been brought about primarily because of, in the 80s, we stopped giving out subsidies to farmers, and therefore farm data hasn't been sought by government in order to give out subsidies. In Europe, for example, they have quite a highly sophisticated farm data set because of farm subsidies given directly to farmers. So farmers have had to provide evidence of their identity and evidence of their activities on the farms. In New Zealand, we don't have a central registry of farms and farm activities. So therefore, technically, we don't know who the farmers are, and technically, we don't actually know where they are. So we've got farm data silos that have merged over time, and it's become very difficult for farmers to comply with all the data requirements made of them, both by central, local government, and also by their own bodies. In other words, the requirements of data have got quite significance, or what we call compliance. The cost of this compliance has become quite significant. To give you some idea, the cost of compliance of data provisioning from the farm, the opportunity cost of that is if you spend an hour of farm time providing data either to local government, central government, or to organisations carrying out farm assurance activities or farm inspection services, or meeting the 17 codes that impact on farmers and 45 odd pieces of legislation. That requires a significant amount of effort, but for every hour spent, the opportunity cost is the equivalent of $240 per hour. So this cost of compliance, cost of data provisioning has become quite onerous, particularly in a community where age is increasing and also availability of labour is decreasing. So how do we make data move around more efficiently? And in particular, farmers want to own or control or have sovereignty over their farm data. Also, farmers are concerned that data could be misused either by parties that they give it to either for one purpose and then it's reused for another purpose, and that generally the provisioning of data is done in such a way that it may also pose security risks. We know also in the background we have increasing concern over security of data and increasing security over protection of privacy rights. So we've got a high level of compliance required of farming. We've got evidence required for quality. We've got evidence required for environmental compliance. We've got evidence required for the some 45 acts that I mentioned, some 17 different farm codes. And this lack of interoperability is causing inefficiency and frustration. We understand that that evidence, that data that's collected is needed in order to provide evidence of compliance, evidence of meeting sustainability targets, evidence of meeting quality assurance programs for offshore markets. But the lack of interoperability between the various requirers of data, or to use a frame, relying parties of data, means that farmers have got frustrated. Now, you can articulate one data set to another data set through API to API, but that may cause problems with data moving easily. And as well, it doesn't necessarily mean that the farmer has given adequate permission that that data can be released, and adequate protection of privacy rights. So there's a requirement for seeing that farmers are complying to the process by which they produce on their farms and meeting regulations. So what we're looking at in the in this model is, rather than providing raw data for compliance, or rather than providing the same data to multiple parties, is to provide a verifiable claim or a verifiable credential. In other words, that if the farm has gone through a compliance audit and a certificate of compliance has been issued, in our view, that should be adequate enough for the relying party to rely on as proof of compliance. And there is how you make those verifiable claims, or what we call a verifiable credential, trustworthy enough to be relayed, the same verifiable credential claim to be relayed to multiple parties, is what we're investigating in this pilot. So the concepts come out of this two key the first problem, which I outlined at the beginning, which was there isn't a common farm register in New Zealand. So there's no unique identifier for a farm. As well, we've got many different types of farms, and we have many different types of farm information system providers and farm information systems that are reliant on data to them. So we have a second problem, which is the other core issue, is that we don't have common data schemas or what's called a common data ontology that allows ease of data going from one party to another party. Even if you permissioned it, it's very difficult for one data provider to synchronize their data schemas with another data, a relying party who relies on that data. Because going back to my earlier comments is we don't have a common farm data ontology because we moved away from a subsidization model. Unlike, for example, in Europe, where, again, to reiterate, because they're subsidized, they had to collect data about the activity of the farmers in order to subsidize that activity. So therefore, common farm data ontologies were built up over time. In New Zealand, you do have data ontologies, but they're within silos. So the meat sector has one, dairy sector has another, the vegetable sector has one, fruit sector has one, forestry has another. So there's no common unifying data ontology. If you go to Standards New Zealand and look up farm data standards, you'll see that there's almost nothing there. So how do we bring these common data elements together that can be reused for providing evidence of compliance? Is we've come up with this digital farm wallet concept, whereby we'll bring in crop information, geospatial information, animal welfare, and environmental data, and bring it into a wallet and create common verifiable credentials or claims that then can be reused. Because if we just look at environmental data or compliance with environmental social governance or ESG criteria, the marketplace is requiring evidence of sustainable production. So, for example, the European and Asian markets want to know that the produce produced on that farm met specific environmental compliance standards. Those same proofs of environmental production standards are required for, say, sustainable loan or financing. In order that loans can be given to farmers at a competitive rate, the farmer has to prove that they're operating in a sustainable manner. So what we're trying to architect is mechanisms by which those claims can be reused or repurposed. So an environmental claim for compliance can be used as an environmental claim for market access, or an environmental claim for financial services, or an environmental claim that can be given to a consumer. So the idea is that once you've proven out the identity of the farm, you can then, that's organizational identity, and it's then put into the wallet and then passed as a verifiable credential or proof, digital proof, to whatever party wants to rely on it. So that's one mechanism by which data can be moved. The second mechanism is to ensure privacy maintenance, is to permission party A, i.e. animal welfare data provider, to pass data to another party. And we do this, and what we're proposing in the digital wallet, it's a bit technical, and happy to go into this in a little bit more detail in Q&A, is around providing in this case, the wallet is non-custodial. Means the wallet doesn't reside with any of the parties. It's held by the farmer themselves. And this goes to the concept of the data sovereignty, that the farmer, if you like, has custodianship of the credentials and has custodianship of the wallet, which doesn't reside with another party. As well, ensuring that the credentials that are passed to the wallet are encrypted. So we're using a pair key-wise system, paired keys, public and private key, to give permission for access to the relying party by provisioning of keys done in what's called asynchronous keys in the wallet. So that means that no one in the network, because that's in effect what we're building as a trusted data network can see the data unless permissioned by the farmer. There's no centralization of the data. The wallet is owned and operated by the farmer. So once we create this non-custodial wallet, and you see examples of custodial wallets with, say, Google Pay, where you might have a credit card in your Google Pay wallet, which is an example of a custodial wallet where that's held by Google. Or if you have an app on your phone that's supplied by a bank, it's an example of a custodial wallet where that wallet sitting inside the banking app is owned and controlled by the bank. In this case, this is a non-custodial wallet, so it is only held by the farmer. So the next key issue is the credential that's passed from the issuer, so the crop information. It might be a credential of, say, the quality of that wheat, the baking score of that wheat meets a certain quality parameter. That proof of quality of that wheat held in that wallet can then be sent to a relying party who might want evidence of it. For example, a banking institution might want to know that the farm is producing produce that's of a certain value or volume. That credential can then be passed to the financial institution. But in the mechanisms that we're looking to adopt is that can be revoked as well. So you've got basically privacy preserving mechanisms are based in the wallet. So the proof of identity of the farm organization, because I've started to talk about organizational identity, is held in the wallet, because in effect, what we're using is trusted verifiers of data to provide us with information of organizational identity that is then held by the wallet holder. So those issuers of those verifiable credentials are part of what we call the Trust Alliance Network. Those issuers are members, and so are the relying parties, so that we have a governance set of rules and policies, so to ensure that this trusted data market follows Privacy Acts, follows Electronic Identity Verification Acts, those sort of privacy acts that are required. And this sort of gives you an idea of what we're going to do with the wallet. And in this case, the wallet is just one. No questions so far, so that's good. I'm looking at the questions to see if there's any questions standing up. So in this case, you can see the issuers, and I've used these that we've got a holder of the wallet who is holding the credentials. In this case, it might be the NZBN number, the owner name, the Federated Farmers number. We have verifiable credentials that come from the issuers. They're held in the wallet, and the wallet then the farmer who holds that wallet gives permission of various relying parties to view those credentials. And that's done in the provisioning of a digital proof, or what's called a verifiable presentation. We have a governance framework which governs the roles, responsibilities of the issuers and the relying parties. And we're getting up to this stage in the pilot. So this is where we're up to. And if I just skip back to this slide here, we've got a pilot that we're kicking off, which has 4 issuers and 4 relying parties. Those 4 issuers are being provided with the tools and the protocols to issue verifiable credentials to be held into the wallets. And then the relying parties will rely on those verifiable credentials, and we've got 4 reliers. So we're basically, it's data integration at a organizational level. So where we're up to is we've gone through with our members. We're just getting the technical onboarding, and the pilot has kicked off with the technical bench testing of the technology. We've formed a technology consortium, which we will relay to parties who the members of those are. So we've gone out worldwide to look at what digital tools are available, what's currently in production internationally, in order to bring these technologies down to New Zealand to deploy down here. Yeah, so this is the Digital Trust Framework Act, or Digital Trust Services Framework Act, which has just passed, gone through Parliament this year and gone to rural assent. It goes live in July 2024. And the purpose of this act is to establish a legal framework for the provision and secure of trusted digital identity services for individuals and organisations, and establish governance and accreditation functions that are transparent and incorporate Te Ao Māori approaches to identity. So our data network of issuers and relying parties, we're looking to pilot the Digital Trust Framework Services Framework, and I'll just show you in the next slide. But this allows Federated Farmers to become the technical phrase is IDP, digital identity provider for farm enterprises. So this is identity at an organizational level. We are conscious that in going through the identity provisioning of the organization, we're also going to have to address identity of the individual who has authority to act on behalf of the organization. So we're spending quite a bit of time with the Department of Internal Affairs through their digital identity services mechanisms to go through how we verify the identity of the individual who has authority over the organizational identity. Note that we're very aware of the Privacy Act and seeking to maintain privacy by doing that. Just to reiterate, the only person that can see the data and the credentials are the holder of the credentials. There's no centralization of data sets. We've decentralized that to the individual holder in a non-custodial wallet. So what that means is privacy preserving and also data minimization. The Act, right? Oh, sorry, I hit the thing. So the Act itself enables us to build a trust identity framework of information providers, or what we've called in our world issuers of data, and they could be government, private sector, individuals who issue information into the wallet when requested by the wallet holder. So the wallet holder or user can call from an issuer, I want this verifiable credential, goes into a wallet. That wallet then holds that verifiable credential. That verifiable credential can then be relayed to a relying party. Now, the Digital Identity Services Trust Framework is quite a mouthful. Sets up the framework on how you become accredited as a network to operate, and the Trust Alliance network is looking to be accredited under this particular act. So there's a whole series of things that we have to get in place: authentication providers, having adequate privacy rules, having adequate policies and procedures around protection, security, and ensuring that we meet with our legislative framework for doing that. Now, what that does is the opportunities for post-pilot is once we've established an identity framework and enabled data to move by permission by the owners of that data, that enables us to, on request, ask permission of the farmer who holds that data to release that for surveying purposes. So that means that Federated Farmers will have access to data by permission to evaluate policy impacts. One of the key issues is how do you get trusted data, and how do you get data from parties who want to willingly give it to you. As well, there are opportunities for Federated Farmers around membership and other benefits that can be relayed through the utilisation of the digital wallet. Any questions so far from anyone listening? No, can't see anything coming up in chat. Okay, so I'm conscious I've got, I'm coming up to about 40 minutes that I've been talking to. I'm coming to the end of my talk, and that's really about it. Now I've come up to 40 minutes. I think I'm on time, hopefully, to 2:45, 2:15. I think I've done it, or maybe I'm a bit short. Are there any questions? Leaves plenty of time for questions. Oh, got some in Q&A. Oh, there we go. Right. Got some questions here. Ian, sorry, I've just seen them pop up. Looks as though getting support from farmers, but who are you having conversations with in the banks and finance companies who are not going to have a lot of confidence in this new approach? They may need to complete IT work at some cost. Well, we actually have financial bodies who are members of our incorporated society. So, and I am in regular correspondence with the bankers, and particularly the sustainable financing, SAFI, sustainable finance. They're conscious that they're missing data from the first mile in order to provide sustainable loans to farmers. It's very difficult to gather evidence of sustainability and put it into a framework that banks can then release information, release finance to. It's quite onerous. But yes, having in fact had conversations this morning with a bank and had multiple conversations with banks. Who is the miner in this area? What is the miner? I'm sorry, Geraldine, I don't know what miner means. Who is the miner in this area? Scenario, with that, if you could type in a clarification of who a miner is, that would be great. And who is paying for the technology and infrastructure? Do farmers have the option of non-participation? Absolutely. No one is. This is completely voluntary. This is not compulsory at all. In fact, that would defeat the purpose. This will be open to. It's envisaged that this tool will be open to federators and non-federated farmers members. There's not envisaged that there would be a cost to utilize this tool. Do most larger farms are managed by families? How responsibility is going to be shared? Oh, that's a really good question, Karen. So Karen, one of the issues we're looking at is how do we build in the individual into the farm wallet in order to give the individual rights over the wallet. And it may be that in the architecture that we're going to have various graduations of rights with the wallet. In other words, some credentials could be utilized by one party on behalf of the farm, and another party might have access to other credentials. So the technology's there to do it. It's just how we articulate it. And that's one of the questions we're going to be asking farmers of when we do the pilot phase and getting feedback as to how we structure multiple parties acting on behalf of the farm to permission the release of farm data or approval for farm data passed from A to B. There is some privacy issues around that that we have to make absolutely clear that we've got the right individual who's got the right rights to release data on behalf of the farm. And a comment from Richard Best, awesome to see the trust framework in action. Yes, well, that's the logic behind our trust frame, our utilization of the trust framework. And look, I'd just like to comment that we have been looking internationally in terms of the digital identity trust framework. The digital identity trust framework is very, very good. And I am full of praise for DIA staff, Department of Internal Affairs staff. It is world-class because what it enables us to do is to build a digital identity framework for individuals, organizations, objects, and software applications. If we look across the ditch, and we have been spending a bit of time looking across at TDIF, which is their Trusted Digital Identity Framework, I think that's what they call it over there, TDIF, is that identity is only about the individual and not about the organization and not about objects. But what this enables us to do is to build an identity framework of objects tied to a farm and individuals tied to a farm. And then the output of those farms can then follow down supply chains to the end user. So we can prove out digital identity at each stage of the custody of those goods, in other words, provenance. But please note that we're building into the models selective disclosure, or the use of zero knowledge proofs, to enable privacy to be maintained. So therefore, in issuing a credential, it may be that I release parts of the credential and not the whole amount. In other words, if I want to give to a relying party information about my farm, I could actually remain anonymous and only give them this part. So that's what we call selective disclosure, and that's making use of new technologies of how verifiable credentials are engineered. So got some more questions come in. Would banks or government not already have such wallets set up? No, they don't, actually. So Gerard, and I know who you are, Gerard. No, the banks don't have these wallets set up. They're what we call, you must come late to the presentation, Gerard. They are what we call custodial wallets. They hold it. This is moving the data out, and it's held by the farms themselves. It's not a response to the Act. It's a response to solve a number of questions, which if you go back to the digital farm wallet, bring it up again, it's reutilizing the data here in the wallet for multiple purposes. So that means a verifiable credential that you've got that proves out environmental compliance, which might be required by a regional council, can be reused with the farm. So for example, a digital farm environment plan. You might have a farm plan that's been audited. You've got a verifiable credential that farm's been audited. You can provide that same credential both to that same proof both to a regional council and to a bank. One's to allow you permission to operate. The other one is to enable finance to be released to you. Oh yeah, and then Simon, I just seen your question. Yes, this is tied to the it is tied to farm compliance. So the logic is that the content will be certified and audited. Yes, and we know that the regional councils are wanting proofs. What we're trying to do is be more efficient in the way in which that data is provided. So rather than a big pile of data provided to the council, in this case, it would be audited data that would be let me get this right. It would be a farm audit of a plan would generate a certificate of compliance that then could be reused. Sorry, hopefully I can elaborate on. Sorry, this is Geraldine. Reckon this is enabled via blockchain where the transaction is a transfer of data as opposed to crypto. So in this case, will not someone need to be able to oh, right. So yeah, that's a blockchain question. So this is a layer above the verifiable data registry. We're not wedded to any particular way in which the issuing of the decentralized identity and the issuing of the verifiable credential is recorded. We don't record any data in any registry. We only record the decentralized identity that connects to that verifiable credential, because you've got to have, here's your credential, and there's a decentralized identity about that credential. So in terms of recording in a registry, we only record the issuing of the DID and the issuing of the verifiable credential. We don't actually see the data itself. With regards to what verifiable data registry type we use, in the pilot, we're examining different types of verifiable data registries, but you don't necessarily need a blockchain. It may be for some goods that you might be required by an offshore party to record that on whatever blockchain they want it recorded on. So the logic is that you just make the technology that we're adopting as agnostic. So we'll use whatever tools and protocols are needed in order to provide market access. We know in the case of the Europeans are building out European blockchain consortiums to record issuing of digital passports for individuals, and they're starting to look at digital product passports. And it may well be that a record might be might need to be recorded on that particular chain. So we are a ledger agnostic is probably the quickest way to doing that, the quickest way of answering that question, Geraldine, without getting into the very deep technical issues around it. Back to Gerard. Yes, apologies, you were 5 minutes late, Gerard. You didn't hear the introduction. Sorry for teasing you. Yes, I've answered your question. No and yes, depending on what the end purpose is. And that's the key bit, is we're not being tied to a particular technology, because if you look at this slide here, you'll see that we've got a whole series of requirements. For example, finance, market access, compliance. So we've got to remain agnostic as to what ledger is required by the purpose that it's used for at the end. So that means we're not wedded to a particular technology, we're not wedded to a particular platform, we're merely the tools and protocols by how a trusted data network operates. Will the researchers be able to access the data? If yes, will they be able to request permission to access additional private data if relevant to the research? Oh yeah, yes, Stuart, very good question. So that is strictly the farmer's decision to release. And the answer is, if it's compelling, then yes, the farmer can give permission. But again, we would require, as a relying party who is relying on data from that farmer, to abide by the principles and rules and policies of the trust framework. So this is a trusted data network, and it means that the relying party who would rely on the data coming from the wallet would have to show to the governance of the data network that they're operating within the bounds of requirements. Say, for example, if it's research and you're recording individuals' data, you'd have to go through an appropriate data release process. You'd have to abide by the Privacy Act. You'd have to say what that was used for. You've got to be able to have the ability to do all of the things in the Privacy Act. If it was data relating to an individual, if it's data relating to an organization, slightly different, but you'd still have to go through the same mechanisms to make sure that you were utilizing the data appropriately. Right. So the identity is decentralized, but the wallet is centralized. No, Dave, both are decentralized. Go back to my earlier comment. There is, this is a non-custodial wallet. Only the farmer has the wallet sitting on their device, or when we roll it out on their tech platform. The wallet is not centralized at all. This is the key to it. The data is decentralized. So the data is held in verifiable credentials, which is held in which is decentralized, which is held in a wallet that is decentralized. We're the opposite of centralized, but noting that you've got centralized data sets, and it may be that you enable permission from party A, who wants party A to send data to party B. But in that case, the farmer would give permission to get the release of the data and make sure that that permission could be revoked. I hope that answered your question, Dave. Karen, so who's paying for all this work infrastructure? Good question. So we have a grant from the government to trial out the pilot, but we know that this provides significant benefits in terms of data architecture to both the issuers and the relying parties. And this means that they don't necessarily need to upgrade existing systems in order to become more aligned with data privacy requirements. So they can keep their legacy systems, and we simply, if you like, bolt on to their systems to allow data to move more easily. So it doesn't involve a great deal of technology investment. It's simply an addition to existing systems. You don't need to upgrade existing systems. Just to clarify, oh, Reese, again, I still don't understand that the Act was mentioned. Really? Perhaps you should ring me, Gerard, to show that while it will meet the Act requires and it goes live. Yeah, no, that's a bit hard to explain. Karen, again, Karen's asked another question. You mentioned the farmers were aging. I personally know someone who's going to do. Okay, so in terms of the reference to the aging, farmers, in my view, are able to handle cell phones. So they tend to use cell phones as a key tool in their business. They're quite used to using apps. So what we're doing is not this technology layer that I've been described were never technically seen by farmers, will be deployed inside apps. So if you like, what we're doing is putting in a technology upgrade in existing apps to allow this way of passing data from one party to another. You seem to be conflating in a broader sense of, for example, data sets of farm information system versus the minimal data representing the verified associated proof. Can you clarify, Robert? You're getting quite technical here, Robert. Permission access, yes, I did clarify. Yes, Karen, back again. What happens during a power outage similar to parts of Northern? Well, you simply have to wait until the power comes on to reboot your cell phone, like any IT infrastructure. This does not work when the power is out, but you just wait till the power comes back and you can then utilize the system like any other IT system. I think I've answered all the questions. There we go, 3:27. If there's any questions, if anyone wants to get in contact with me, just connect via LinkedIn, search for me on LinkedIn, make a connection, and happy to answer any questions you might have. There we go.